The monitor did not beep. It screamed a single flat note that filled the bay high and thin and merciless. Time of death, 2:58 a.m. The resident's voice sounded hoarse, like he was tired of saying those words. He clicked the pen sign, and signed the form on the clipboard and stepped away from the bed. The sheet came up over the man's face. One fast movement practiced almost casual. Everyone else drifted off at once. A tech unplugged lines. Someone wheeled the crash cart back toward the wall. The noise of the emergency room rolled back in phones and footsteps and the low mutter of voices. Only Harper Quinn stayed. She stood by the bed for another second, palms resting on the cold metal rail, watching the thin edge of the sheet where it met the man's neck. There was a faint bruise there just above the collarbone. Force of impact, she thought. Steering wheel, maybe? The detail etched itself into her head whether she wanted it or not. The smell of antiseptic clung to the air, fighting a losing battle with the copper of dried blood. Harper exhaled quiet and set her hands to work. She wiped the rails, wiped the mattress, stripped the bed in neat, efficient movements. She did not rush, but there was no waste in any line of her body. When she finished, the bed looked anonymous again, empty and waiting. Quinn. The voice hit her from the doorway. Dr. Victor Lang stood there, white coat open, surgical cap hanging from one hand. He looked as if he had just stepped out of a catalog. Not a wrinkle in sight, not a drop of blood. Harper turned her head. "Yes, doctor," she said. He swept a glance over the bay, over the clean bed, over her scrubs that were dotted with brown stains from earlier. His mouth flattened for a heartbeat at the sight, then smoothed again. "Next time you page me with a code at 3 a.m, make sure there is something I can actually fix," he said. "And stick to what you do well, moving beds, stocking meds. Leave the critical calls to people with the right training." He did not say surgeons. He did not have to. Harper felt the words land, felt the familiar sting, then felt it slide away. Her fingers tightened slightly around the bundle of used linens. "Understood," she said. Lang glanced at the clock, adjusted the cuff of his coat as if he had better things waiting in the operating room, and walked off. His shoes did not squeak. They never did. Harper carried the linens to the cart, dropped them with the others, and turned as someone called out from the central station. "Harper, room 3, kid with trouble breathing, parents freaking out." "I am on it," she answered. Room 3 was too bright. The overhead light bounced off white tile and stainless steel and the terrified eyes of a 6-year-old girl who sat hunched on the bed, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. Her breaths came in tight, high whistles. Her lips had a bluish tint that did not belong on a child's face. Her mother hovered close, one hand on her daughter's shoulder, the other twisting a necklace. The father stood rigid at the foot of the bed, eyes fixed on the monitor like he could drag the numbers up by sheer will. Dr. Amir Patel stood at the med cart, yanking drawers open shuffle of plastic and blister packs, loud in the cramped room. "Where's the pediatric dose of Epi?" he muttered. "Why is nothing labeled in here?" "It is on the top shelf, left side, second bin," Harper said without looking. "You passed it twice." Patel glanced over his shoulder, annoyed and flustered. "If you know where it is, why are you not getting it?" Harper was already moving. She slid open the correct bin, pulled out the pre-filled epinephrine syringe, double-checked the label in one quick glance. She knelt beside the bed so that she was at the girl's eye level. "Hi, Mia," she said, reading the name from the bracelet. "My name is Harper. Your lungs are a little angry right now. I'm going to help them calm down, all right?" Mia's eyes were wet and wide. She nodded once. Harper swabbed the skin, chose a site that was not the one printed in bold on the training posters, but one that would soak the drug into the bloodstream a little faster. Muscle memory guided her hands. She pressed the plunger. Patel frowned. "That is not the standard injection site," he said. "Watch her chest," Harper replied, "not the poster." For 3 long seconds, nothing changed. The wheeze stayed tight and high. Then Mia's ribs began to move with a little more ease. The whistling softened. Her shoulders dropped a centimeter. The blue shade around her lips lightened toward pink. Her mother made a small choking sound and leaned forward, covering her daughter's hands with both of hers. Her father let out a breath that sounded like it had been stuck for hours. The monitor chirped a regular rhythm. Patel stared, then glanced at the syringe Harper was recapping. "Good catch," he said finally. It came out reluctant, like the words cost something. Harper shook her head. "It is her body that did the work," she said. "We just helped it remember how." In the doorway, Lang paused on his way past, taking in the scene. The calmer child, the relieved parents, the steady monitor. His gaze touched on Harper for the briefest moment. "Avoid letting these rooms turn into circus tents," he said. "Families read chaos as incompetence. Keep it quiet." He did not ask who had given the injection. He did not need to know. The credit, if there was any to be had, would fold softly into his idea of a well-run unit. Harper smoothed Mia's hair back from her face and stepped out into the hallway. The smell of coffee filtered through the chemical tang of disinfectant. Somewhere someone laughed too loud at something not very funny. The clock over the nurse station crawled toward 4. Her shift ended at 6. By 7, the rain was coming down in thin, straight lines outside her apartment window. The building was old brick, 4 floors, the kind that had bad insulation and good ghosts. Harper hung her damp jacket on the single hook by the door, kicked off her sneakers, and stood in the living room for a moment, letting the silence settle. The quiet here felt different from the quiet at the hospital. There it was full of waiting of breath held between alarms. Here it was just empty. On the small wooden table by the wall sat a chipped mug, a folded notebook, and a lone ceramic bowl. No photos, no plants. On the far shelf, a cardboard box that she never quite unpacked. Harper walked to the desk and opened the top drawer. Beneath a tangle of pens and a half-used roll of tape lay a heavy coin dull under the apartment light. She lifted it between thumb and forefinger. The metal was cold against her skin. On one side, the emblem of a Navy helicopter squadron. On the other, the words engraved in a font that had once seemed like a promise. First in, last out. Her thumb traced the letters, then paused at a small, almost invisible scratch near the rim. To anyone else, it would be nothing. To her, it was a mark from another life. A night in a desert that still woke her out of sleep. A blast wave, sand in her teeth, hands slick with blood. Somewhere outside, a helicopter passed overhead. The rotors beat the air in a slow, deep rhythm that made the glass of her window hum. It was not the light, high chop of a news chopper. It had weight. It pulled her attention up toward the sky she could not see. Harper's shoulders tightened. Her heartbeat picked up once, then twice, then steadied as the sound faded. She looked back down at the coin. The overhead light caught the edge, made it flash for a second like something alive. Then she shoved it back into the drawer and closed it with more force than necessary. In the sudden stillness, the only sound was the soft ticking of the kitchen clock and the faint, ghostly echo of a flatline that was no longer there. Tomorrow night, the monitors would sing again. For now, the city breathed in the rain, and Harper let her palms rest flat on the cool wood of the desk, as if bracing against a wave no one else could see. Night slipped back over Seattle like it had never left. By the time Harper walked through the staff entrance of Bayview General again, the rain had settled into a steady mist that clung to her hair and soaked the cuffs of her scrub pants. Inside the hospital, lights hit her eyes with that familiar, sterile brightness. The air smelled of coffee disinfectant and the faint, sour edge of too many bodies pressed into too little space. She tapped her badge to clear security and stepped into the emergency department. The waiting room was fuller than usual, people hunched over their phones. A toddler slept sideways across 2 plastic chairs, one shoe gone. A teen boy stared at the wall with a bloody towel pressed to his forehead. Their voices blended into low, restless noise. At the nurse station, Jenna Park was flipping through a stack of charts. Her dark hair was pinned up, a pencil stuck behind one ear, stress pinched at the corners of her mouth. "You picked a good one to come in on," Jenna said, as soon as she saw Harper. "We are already 3 beds over capacity." Harper pulled on a pair of gloves and began straightening the pile of IV lines on the counter so they would not tangle. "What happened?" she asked. "Flu mostly. 1 bar fight. 2 chest pains that might be heartburn, might not." Jenna dropped her voice a little. "Lang is in one of his moods. He has been stalking up and down the halls like he owns the air. He owns a lot of the charts," Harper said. Jenna snorted, quick and sharp. They moved together without much talk for the first hour. Vitals, IVs, a suturing session on a kid who had fallen off a skateboard and split his chin. Time thinned out became a series of small tasks that filled their hands and left little room for thought. Near midnight, Lang appeared at the edge of the station. He had changed into fresh scrubs, his white coat folded over one arm. The faint smell of surgical soap followed him. "Listen up," he said. "Highway Patrol just called in a pileup on I-5, multi-vehicle, multiple criticals. Trauma team is gearing up. I want all non-emergent patients off the board or parked in chairs, clear beds, clear halls." Jenna grabbed a pen and started marking the board in fast, tight strokes. "How many ambulances?" Harper asked. "Enough," Lang said. "They are sending the worst straight to the trauma bays and OR suites." He looked around the ER, counting heads. "I do not want anyone starting procedures that cannot be finished quickly. Stabilize and transfer. And do not improvise." "Understood." The word landed heavier on Harper than on anyone else. She felt his gaze on her for a moment longer than necessary. "Understood," she replied. Within 30 minutes, the place shifted tone. You could feel it, a kind of tightening in the air. There was more running, more raised voices. The overhead speakers crackled to life off and on with transport calls. Nurses pushed stretchers out to meet incoming rigs. The trauma elevators pinged doors, opening and closing again and again. Then the call came overhead, calm voice of the operator not matching the words. "Attention, Trauma Team 1 and 2 report to operating suites immediately. Multi-vehicle collision, I-5 northbound. Repeat, all trauma personnel report to operating suites. Lang straightened like a string had been pulled through his spine. That is my cue, he said. He slid into his white coat, checked his pager, then looked back at Harper. You and the others keep the lights on and the paperwork flowing. Do not start anything heroic. We have enough chaos upstairs. I will do my job, Doctor, Harper said. She could not tell if he heard the edge in her voice or if he chose to ignore it. He was already moving away, calling orders to a resident who trotted behind him with a tablet. The ER felt different after the trauma team left. Not quieter, just exposed. Like a room after someone removes the central support beam and everyone waits to see if the ceiling will hold. Jenna blew out a breath. So that is it, she said. If anything insane rolls in, we smile and say, please hold, the real adults are busy. Harper checked the supply cart, counting rapidly, her lips moving without sound. We do what we can with what we have, she said. The hours bled forward. 2 a.m, 2:30. The rhythm of the night got ragged. A drunk man yelled in Bay 5 until security arrived. An older woman in Bay 7 tried to joke through her chest pain, while Harper adjusted her nasal cannula and quietly urged the monitor to stay in a safe range. At 2:55, the overhead lights flickered once. It was a quick blink, but long enough to make everyone look up. The storm outside had thickened. Rain hit the high windows in uneven bursts. Somewhere a transformer groaned. Harper was wiping down a gurney in the main hallway when she heard it. Sirens, several of them rising together close. She paused her hand still on the rail and listened. The pitch was sharper than the steady flow of city sirens. This sound carried urgency right into the bones of the building. The bay doors at the ambulance entrance slid open with a wet hiss. Cold air rushed in, smelled of rain and exhaust, and something metallic and burnt. 2 paramedics burst through, soaked, pushing a stretcher at speed. On it lay a man in torn flight suit pants and a shredded dark shirt, chest bandaged in a rough field wrap that was already blooming through with fresh blood. Adult male, early 30s, one paramedic called. Rollover from the I-5 collision, possible ejection. Severe blunt chest trauma, bilateral leg fractures, suspected pelvic injury. We lost pulse in the rig, 30 minutes of compressions en route, no response. The monitor clipped to the side of the stretcher showed a straight line. No peaks, no dips, just a cold horizontal glow. Flatline. For a second, the whole room felt like it held the same breath. Put him in Bay 1, Jenna shouted, her voice hitching at the end. They swung the stretcher into place. The man's face was pale under the smear of road dirt and blood. Dark hair stuck to his forehead. His lips were a faint, dusky color that made Harper's stomach tighten. Name? She asked out of habit. Unidentified Picumia. The paramedic replied. No wallet on him. Might be in the wreckage. There was a flight jacket in the front seat, navy patches. That is all we know. Harper nodded once. She heard Lang before she saw him. His voice carried down the corridor from the direction of the trauma elevators. What is going on down here? I thought all criticals were routed upstairs. He appeared in the doorway, still in OR cap and mask around his neck, eyes catching the flat line on the monitor. The paramedic spread his hands helplessly. All trauma suites were full, Yafesh, he said. Dispatch told us to bring this one here. They said ER would push for a bay. Lang stared at the monitor, then at the man on the bed. His jaw tightened. His fingers began to drum a restless rhythm against his thigh. We do not have the staff for a thoracotomy down here, he said. I'm not opening a chest without a full team, not in this room. We never got him back, Operke, the paramedic said softly. We worked him the whole way. Jenna glanced at Harper, eyes wide, scanning her face for a hint of instruction. Patel hovered near the foot of the bed, holding a bag of fluid no one had ordered yet. Lang lifted the corner of the field dressing, peered under it, then let it fall back into place. Blood seeped through the gauze and dripped over the edge, pattering onto the floor in slow, heavy drops. Time of death, he began. Harper stepped closer. The air felt colder here, close to the man's skin. She placed her fingers gently along his jaw, felt the chill of his flesh. Too cold. She slid her hand to his chest, pressing through the bandage, then looked past the monitor and straight at the bare wires beneath the adhesive pads. Something caught her eye. Between the long, flat segments of the line, there was the faintest shiver. Not a full wave, not even a proper spike. Just a tremor like something deep inside refusing to go still. Wait, she said. Lang flicked a look at her. Nurse Quinn stepped back, he snapped. We are not going to pretend a corpse is a candidate for heroics. Not tonight. He's cold, Harper said. Colder than he should be. That crashed the rain time on the highway. Hypothermia is slowing cellular death. The heart is stunned, not gone. Patel leaned toward the screen, squinting. I did see a flicker a second ago, he said. Could have been artifact. It is not artifact, Harper said. She could hear the conviction in her own voice, clear and hard as glass. He still has a window. Lang straightened the muscles in his neck, standing out. A window to what, he said? To bleed out on an ER floor while we tire ourselves out. You are a Nurse Quinn. Know your scope. The room shrank around them. The hum of the vents, the soft crackle of plastic packaging under someone's foot, the faint squeak of the monitor cable as it shifted. Harper felt something inside her, something she had been sitting on for years, move. Give me 3 hours, she said. The words sounded strange in the air, too calm for what they were asking. Lang blinked. Excuse me, he said. He said. 3 hours, Harper repeated. If in 3 hours he does not have a rhythm, I will sign whatever forms you need. I will take responsibility for the call. A junior intern near the doorway let out a short, nervous laugh that broke halfway through. You cannot do that, he said. You are a nurse. You cannot take legal responsibility for a code like this. Harper did not look at him. I do not need permission to care that he is not finished, she said. Her gaze stayed on Lang. I need a team that will follow orders. No one moved. The flatline hummed on thin and high. Lang opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. His hands, the famous surgeon hands, remained empty at his sides. We do not have the staff, he said, but the words lacked their usual sharpness. Harper reached for a fresh pair of gloves, snapped them on over fingers that had stopped shaking the moment she stepped up to the bed. We have enough, she said. We have arms, we have heat, we have drugs, and we have time if we take it now. She glanced once more at the monitor. The line flickered again, almost too faint to see. Her decision solidified. Give me 3 hours, she said again, and this time it was not a request. No one spoke. The flatline kept his thin, steady sound like a blade held against glass. Jenna swallowed hard. Her eyes moved from the monitor to Harper, then to Lang. She looked like someone caught between two cliffs. Doctor, she said finally, voice too small for the size of the room. What do you want us to do? Lang was still staring at Harper. A muscle jumped in his cheek. What I want, he said slowly, is an organized, rational department, not a mutiny. His gaze shifted to the man on the bed. The ruined chest, the legs at wrong angles, the blood on the floor. His fingers flexed once, twice, as if they missed the weight of a scalpel. We log the time, Kilby, he continued. We stop pretending we can fix everything. That is what I want. Harper stepped into his line of sight, not close enough to challenge, but close enough that he had to look at her to look at the bed. I am not pretending, she said. I am telling you his physiology is on our side for once. Hypothermia buys time. We either use it or waste it. The words settled around them like dust. The paramedic who had ridden in with the patient cleared his throat. His hands were still pressed to the guardrail, knuckles white. We kept thinking he would pop back up, he said quietly. Even with no pulse, skin was like ice. We did not want to stop in that cold. Harper nodded. You did not stop, she said. Now it is our turn. Lang glanced toward the doorway, toward the hall that led to the trauma elevators and the safety of the operating room hierarchy. The halls where he made sense. The halls where everyone knew exactly who he was. I cannot authorize this, he said. You do not have to, Harper replied, and there was something in her voice that none of them had heard before. Not raised, not angry, simply absolute. You only have to decide whether you are in the room or out of it. That did it. The choice landed in front of him like an instrument tray. He could pick it up or leave it there. Either way, the clock was already ticking. Lang took a step back. His face looked smaller without the confidence that usually filled it. Do whatever you are going to do, he said. But if this turns into a disaster, it is on your license, not mine. Noted, Harper said. She turned away from him, already moving. Jenna, airway and oxygen, she said. Patel, you are on meds and lines. I want warm saline, not room temp. Set it to 40 degrees if you can. 2 large bore IVs wide open. Someone grab 3 warming blankets, focus on his core, not the limbs. And get me an old-school defib kit from the EMS bag, the manual one. The ER, which had been frozen in confusion a few seconds before, jerked back into motion. Jenna slid an oxygen mask into place, adjusting the straps around the patient's head with hands that shook, then steadied. Patel moved to the cart, grabbing supplies, bumping his hip into the plastic drawers and swearing under his breath as they rattled. The paramedics stepped back out of the way, eyes wide. They had seen wild things on the side of the road. This felt different. This felt like watching someone walk onto thin ice on purpose. Harper peeled back the field dressing again, careful not to rip the clotted tissue beneath. The wound in the man's chest was ugly, jagged, a torn doorway through muscle and skin. She inhaled slow, felt the hospital fall away for a heartbeat. In its place, she saw hard-packed sand under her knees, smelled burning fuel, heard radio chatter that cut in and out. Her hand moved as if it remembered the path before her mind did. She slid her gloved fingers into the wound through the sticky warmth, pressing deeper until she found the firm give of the pericardium. Underneath it, the silent muscle that should have been pounding against her touch. The temperature made her throat tighten. Even inside his chest, he was cold. "I am in contact with the heart," she said, not for drama, but so the room would know exactly what was happening. Starting internal compressions. Her forearm muscles flexed as she began to squeeze rhythm, steady, mimicking the normal beat his heart refused to take up on its own. "Jenna, ventilate and sync every third compression," she added. "Patel Ipi 1 milligram, then bicarb 100 milliequivalents. Call pharmacy and tell them we are burning through their stock." "On it," Patel muttered, already filling syringes. Jenna squeezed the bag valve mask, eyes flicking from Harper's arm to the monitor. Breath in, breath in, breath in. The mask fogged with each squeeze, then cleared. The noise of the ER faded to the edges of Harper's hearing. There were still other patients, other beeps, other calls overhead. For this bay, for this moment, there was only the thin line on the monitor, the weight of the heart in her hand, and the ticking count in the back of her mind. 30 compressions, 60, 90. Her shoulders began to burn. "Warm saline is up," someone called. 40 degrees. "Hang it," Harper said. "Both arms. Gravity is your friend." She could feel sweat start to slide along her temple beneath her hairline, trapped there by the elastic of her cap. The gloves stuck slightly as she adjusted her grip, careful not to tear more tissue, careful not to let her fingers cramp. Minutes crawled. "How long has it been?" Jenna asked. 16 minutes since arrival, Patel said, reading the wall clock. It felt longer. It always did when everything hinged on a sound that refused to come. Harper kept the compressions going. Her movements grew smaller, more economical, conserving strength without losing force. Her focus narrowed down to the sensation of muscle and memory. In Fallujah, she had done this in a transport truck lit only by a single red bulb knees sliding in diesel and dust. Here, she had overhead lights and clean apparatus and warm saline. There was no excuse to stop. At the 30-minute mark, Jenna's eyes were wet. "Maybe this is just prolonging it," she whispered. "Maybe he's already gone and we are just pushing on a body." Harper heard her but did not look up. "Right now, gone is a word on a form," she said. "Until that heart breaks apart or his brain swells beyond return, he is a set of numbers and a chance. Keep ventilating." Jenna nodded, jaw clenched. The mask kept moving. Lang had not left the room after all. He stood against the wall near the head of the bed, arms folded tightly across his chest, mouth pressed in a hard line. His eyes never left Harper's hands. He had trained his whole career for clean fields, controlled incisions, predictable anatomy. This was not that. This was messy and brutal and unscripted. "This is not sustainable," he said at one point almost to himself. "Neither is dying at 30, Harper answered to voice level. "Keep counting, Patel. Call out every 10 minutes. 40 minutes, Patel said, then 50. The patient's skin, which had been almost waxy gray, started to take on the faintest blush. Not health, not yet, but less corpse. "Bring those warming blankets," Harper said. "Wrap his torso. Do not waste them on his arms." A junior nurse cheeks flushed hurried in with an armful of folded cloth. The blankets steamed slightly as she spread them over the man's chest and abdomen, tucking in edges around Harper's arm. The heat seeped slowly into the air, fogging the top edge of the monitor screen. Someone wiped it clear with a sleeve. An hour and 10 minutes. Harper's arm felt like it belonged to someone else. She ignored the tremor that tried to start in her wrist, locking her fingers around the silent organ in a firm, practiced grip. Her mind skimmed through the protocol steps she had learned in another life. Cold resuscitation. Gradual rewarming. Avoiding sudden shifts that could trigger arrhythmias too wild to control. Arrhythmias are still rhythms, she reminded herself. Rhythms can be converted, flat lines cannot. "An hour 20, Patel said. "Get me that portable defib," Harper replied, the manual one. He brought it to her, dragging the trolley with his foot. She nodded toward the adhesive pads already stuck to the patient's chest. "Check your connections," she said. "I want good contact. We are going to augment, not replace what I am doing." Lang stirred. "You are going to shock a heart that is not even properly beating," he said. "A stunned heart needs a push," she said, "not a textbook." He looked like he wanted to argue, then stopped. He looked like a man watching a bridge being built in front of him from pieces he did not trust, but could not deny. Patel confirmed the settings. Harper held her compressions, counted to 3 in her head, and nodded. "Charge," she said. The defibrillator whined softly, then beeped ready. "Everyone clear except me," Harper said. "I am already inside." Jenna stepped back, hands lifted. The other nurses moved to the edges of the bay. Harper kept her hand in place and felt the sharp buzzing snap as the current sliced through the man's chest. His body jerked a small convulsion under the blankets, then sagged again. The monitor line jumped smeared, then settled into flat calm once more. Again, Harper said, and keep that saline going. 90 minutes. The room had fallen into a strange quiet. No one spoke unless they had to. Even the overhead codes elsewhere seemed more distant, like they belonged to another building. Sweat stood out on brows and upper lips. The smell of warmed blankets blended with alcohol wipes and the metallic tang of blood. 2 hours. The patient's color had shifted further. The blue had drained from his lips. His fingers were no longer stiff. They bent slightly when Jenna moved them out of the way to adjust a monitor lead. Look at his skin, she said, the tiniest spark entering her voice. We are buying back territory, Harper replied. Keep the pace. Her own body felt like a map of complaints. Shoulder, elbow, wrist. Her lower back chimed in every time she shifted her weight. Her fingers deep inside the wound had begun to ache in a dull, grinding way. She could not remember the last time she had drank water. It did not matter. 2 hours 20, Patel said. Any activity, Harper asked. He studied the screen. The line was not perfectly flat anymore. Tiny oscillations pitted its length. No full complexes, no real waves, just hints. Possibly he began. Call it when it's certain, she said, not before. 2 hours 40. Her breathing had gone shallow more from focus than from lack of air. She adjusted her stance, feet a little wider, knees slightly bent, took some of the strain out of her spine. Listen, Jenna whispered suddenly. At first, Harper thought she meant the room. Then she realized Jenna was talking about the monitor. The flat hum had changed. Not much. Just enough that the silence between pulses of static felt different. Harper glanced up, eyes narrowing. On the screen, a fine, quivering line had replaced the smooth bar. It trembled across the grid, too low to be anything but a promise too chaotic to rest on. Fine ventricular fibrillation, Lang said under his breath. He sounded like a professor naming a phenomenon he had only ever seen in textbooks. Still a rhythm, Harper said. Charge again, stronger this time. Patel's fingers moved over the controls. The machine whined. Harper kept her hand around the heart, feeling its surface twitch under her palm in rapid, disorganized flutters. Clear, she said. The shock hit. This time the body jerked harder, blankets shifting. The quiver on the screen spiked into wild, coarse waves, then dropped, then surged again. Come on, Harper murmured. She did not realize she had spoken out loud. The waves began to regularize a stuttering series of peaks and valleys that flirted with a pattern, then faltered. Again, she said. The third shock cracked through the air like a small thunderclap. For a moment, everything in the room seemed to hang. Even the overhead lights felt brighter, as if trying to see. On the monitor, a single tall, clean spike rose, then another, then another. The sound shifted from a high, continuous tone to a series of discrete beeps, spaced far apart at first, then closer again. 40 beats per minute. 52. 68. 74. Jenna gasped a raw sound. The paramedic let out a low oath, something half prayer, half disbelief. Patel blinked, then started laughing under his breath, a shaky, incredulous sound he tried to smother with the back of his hand. He has a rhythm, he said. Sinus rhythm. I am looking at a sinus rhythm. Harper stayed where she was for a moment longer, hand still on the heart, feeling its muscle thud against her palm in strong, defiant contractions. Hold ventilation steady, she said. No one change anything too fast. His brain needs every good second we have just bought. Her arm finally slipped free from the wound. Blood streaked the glove all the way to her elbow. The air on her skin felt almost cold after the closeness of the chest. She stepped back. The room swayed slightly around the edges, then settled. Someone thrust a basin and a roll of gauze toward her. She nodded thanks and began to wrap a clean dressing over the wound fingers, still precise, despite the tremor that now had room to arrive. Lang stepped away from the wall and came to the bedside. He stopped just short of bumping into her, as if unsure what distance was correct. He looked at the monitor, at the green peaks marching across the screen, then at Harper. 3 hours, he said quietly. You said 3 hours. Harper glanced up at the clock on the wall. 3 hours and 2 minutes since the paramedics had crashed through the doors. He cut it close, she said. Some people like to take the long way back. The man's chest rose and fell under the blankets in time with the ventilations. The pulse at his neck jumped under Jenna's fingers when she checked. He is really here, she said softly. He is actually here. A murmur spread through the small crowd gathered in the hall. People who had slowed on their way past and stayed when they realized what was happening. They began to peel away now, some shaking their heads, some smiling to themselves. The noise in the ER rose back to its usual level, but something in it had changed. Harper stripped off her gloves. Her hands underneath were pale and wrinkled skin pruned from sweat. A faint red line marked her wrist where the cuff had dug in. Call ICU, she said to Jenna. Tell them we are sending up a critical post-arrest with prolonged resuscitation and field chest trauma. They will need to keep him warm and slow." Jenna nodded and moved off, already reaching for the phone. Patel cleared his throat. "What should we write for the code duration?" he asked. Harper picked up the chart and pen. "Start time 2:58, she said. Return of spontaneous circulation at 5:01. She did the math in her head, felt the weight of each minute. "Write it all," she added. "Every intervention, every dose. Someone is going to want to know how we got here." Lung watched her write. The pride he usually carried so easily was nowhere on his face. In its place sat something heavier, harder to name. When she glanced up again, his eyes met hers. "Who taught you to do that?" he asked, "with your hand inside someone's chest for 3 hours. Harper capped the pen. "Not here," she said. "Get me a real chest tube kit and a transfer team. He is not done with us yet." She set the chart down and went back to the bedside, palm steady, as outside the windows the storm began slowly to thin. They rolled him out of the bay with a small parade of equipment trailing behind. The new dressing on his chest was clean. The IV bags swung from their poles, clear fluid sliding down the lines. The monitor above the stretcher ticked out its steady pattern of beeps, each matched to a sharp green spike. Harper walked at the head of the bed, one hand on the frame. Her other hand rested lightly on the side rail near his shoulder, more out of instinct than necessity, as if she did not quite trust the universe not to change its mind. In the elevator to the intensive care unit, the air felt too warm. The lights hummed. Jenna stood at the foot of the bed, reading off vitals to an ICU nurse who had met them at the doors. "Sinus rhythm holding in the 70s, Jenna said. "Blood pressure 90/58, rising slowly with fluids. Core temp is up from earlier, now 32.5. The ICU nurse nodded, eyes on the chart, already thinking several steps ahead. "What do we know about him?" she asked. "Any history, meds, allergies?" "Nothing," Harper said. "No ID on him at arrival. He came in as a John Doe from the freeway collision." As they moved down the ICU corridor past rooms with glass fronts and muted monitors, Harper noticed something tucked under the patient's back, a scrap of dark fabric caught between the mattress and his hip. "Hold for a second," she said. They paused just long enough for her to slide the cloth free. It was part of a flight jacket singed at one edge, road grit ground into the weave. On the remaining intact section she could see the shadow of a patch. The thread had been ripped in the crash, but what was left of the design was still clear. Wings, an anchor, United States Navy. Below that, barely clinging to the torn cloth, a narrower strip of embroidery in white. "First in, last out." The same words were pressed into the coin in her drawer at home. Heat worked its way up the back of her neck for a heartbeat. She folded the scrap and slipped it into the front pocket of her scrub top. The ICU room they received for him was small but bright. Machines waited beside the bed, powered on and humming. A respiratory therapist moved in to switch him from the bag valve mask to a ventilator. The ICU physician on call arrived just as they were transferring him from stretcher to bed. "Walk me through it," the physician said, eyes on the patient even as she spoke. Harper gave the report concise and complete. Highway pileup, no pulse on arrival, hypothermia, 3 hours of internal compressions, medications, defibrillation timing, gradual rewarming. The physician's eyebrows rose slightly at the length of the resuscitation, but she did not interrupt. When Harper finished, the physician nodded once. "All right," she said. "We will keep the temp climb slow, keep an eye on swelling. Someone page neurology, respiratory adjust tidal volume based on his labs when we get them." The ICU team closed around the bed, settling into their rhythm. Harper stepped back until she reached the door. For a moment, she just watched the rise and fall of the man's chest under the vent, the way his fingers no longer looked like carved wax. She realized she did not know his name. Not beyond the embroidered hint on burned fabric. "Thank you, Quinn," the ICU physician said. "We will take it from here." Harper inclined her head and left. By the time she returned to the emergency department, the adrenaline had drained out of her muscles, leaving behind a hollow fatigue. The hallway lights seemed sharper. Every sound felt a little too loud. In the staff restroom, she scrubbed her arms at the sink, watching the diluted blood swirl pink, then clear down the drain. When she straightened, her reflection in the mirror looked older than she remembered. Dark shadows under her eyes. A faint line between her brows that had not been there 5 years ago. She dried her hands on a thin paper towel and stepped back into the main corridor. The ER had filled again while she was gone. The beds were occupied by the steady stream of human problems that had nothing to do with freeway wreckage. A man clutched his abdomen and groaned. A teenager with a sprained ankle scrolled through her phone. An older woman whispered into her husband's ear, eyes shining, as she tried to make him laugh around the cannula. Life in all its tired, stubborn forms. Lang stood at the central station talking to a resident. When he saw Harper, he broke off mid-sentence. His eyes dropped briefly to the faint red marks still circling her wrists where the gloves had dug in. "You should get some fluids in you," he said. The words were awkward on his tongue, like a phrase from a language he did not speak often. "I will," Harper replied. For a rare moment he seemed about to say more. His mouth opened then closed. He turned back to the resident instead, gesturing toward a stack of charts. Harper moved past them, checking on the other bays. Her body wanted a chair, a wall, a disappearing act. Habit kept her on her feet. The clock pushed toward 6 a.m. Outside the high windows, the storm that had pounded the city all night softened into a constant gray. Harper had just finished changing a dressing on a small fracture in Bay 4 when a new sound rolled through the building. It started as a low vibration of faint tremor in the soles of her shoes. For a second she thought it was distant thunder. Then it grew deep and took on a pattern that her bones recognized before her ears completely did. Rotor wash. Jenna poked her head out of the meds room, frowning. "Is that life flight?" she asked. Harper shook her head. Life flight was higher pitched, a busy chop in the air. This sound was slower, heavier, each rotation punching through the atmosphere with deliberate force. The windows began to rattle in their frames. A few chart folders on the station counter vibrated toward the edge. The overhead lights quivered once. In the waiting room, people looked up. A child pointed at the ceiling. A man with an ice pack taped to his hand muttered a curse. Security stepped toward the front doors, instinct moving him before a thought. He glanced through the glass toward the parking lot, then back in, eyes wide. "I have never heard that one this low," he said. Someone else said, "Are we under some kind of drill?" Then the overhead intercom crackled. Not with a code. With a simple instruction that no one could quite parse. "All available clinical staff remain in place," the operator said. "Repeat, remain in place." The sound intensified. Dust shook loose from the vents. Papers rustled. Cups on desks trembled. Harper walked to the narrow hall window that looked up toward the roof. From that angle, she could not see the pad itself, but she could see the shadow move across the neighboring buildings, dark and solid and wrong-sized for the usual hospital traffic. The rotor slowed, then settled into a constant churn. "It is landing on our roof," Jenna whispered at her shoulder. "Military," the security guard said from the doorway, sounding certain. "You do enough years near bases, you learn the difference." The doors at the ambulance entrance opened again. This time, there was no gurney, no stretcher. 8 figures moved through in formation, a block of motion and dark fabric. They wore tactical gear helmets clipped to their belts, weapons slung low and safe, but clearly not decorative. Patches on their shoulders caught the fluorescent light. United States Navy. Special Warfare. The one in front, tall early 40s, walked like every step was already planned. His eyes swept the room once, cataloging people, exits, potential threats, potential allies. He stopped in the center of the ER floor. His voice cut through the space with the same precision. "We are looking for an emergency nurse named Harper Quinn," he said. "We require her presence immediately." The ER, which had just begun to settle into its morning shuffle, froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. A monitor beeped in the distance, suddenly too loud. A patient coughed, then fell silent, sensing the change in the room. Jenna turned slowly toward Harper, her mouth forming a small O. "There," she said, before she could stop herself pointing. Harper felt every gaze in the room land on her skin at once. For a fraction of a second, she considered the drawer in her apartment with the coin tucked inside it. The night she had moved houses, changed accounts, stayed ahead of the parts of her past that still had clearance levels attached. So much for staying small. She stepped forward into the clear space between the bays. "I am Harper Quinn," she said. The man in front took in her appearance. Scrubs, wrinkled hair pulled back in a simple tie, faint stain at the edge of her shoe from an earlier shift. His expression did not shift into surprise or doubt. If anything, it settled into something like recognition. He closed the distance between them by 3 measured strides. Then he stopped, straightened, and lifted his right hand in a sharp, formal salute. "Commander Quinn," he said, his tone suddenly very precise. "Lieutenant Commander Jordan Briggs, Naval Special Warfare, requesting permission to address." Gasps moved through the ER like a small ripple. "Commander." Lang stepped forward so quickly his pen rolled off the chart he had been holding. It clattered on the floor unnoticed. "That is not possible," he said. "She is a level 1 ER nurse. You must have your information crossed." Briggs did not look at him at first. His attention stayed on Harper. Only when she nodded once, giving the permission he had asked for, did he shift his gaze. "With respect, Doctor," Briggs said, "our information is not crossed." A second operator stepped up beside him, clipboard in hand, face half hidden behind a trimmed beard and a pair of dark, tired eyes. "We tracked our pilot to this facility," the second man said. "We were told he arrived in cardiac arrest after the freeway pileup. We were told no trauma surgeons were available and that an ER nurse ran a 3-hour cold code with internal compressions." He tapped the edge of the clipboard. We were also told the field suturing pattern on his vest was a match for techniques taught only in the Black Line Advanced Combat Medicine program. He lifted his eyes to Harper. There is only one graduate of that program unaccounted for in active rosters, he said. One medic who walked away after Fallujah listed as discharged for personal reasons. Phantom Doc. A murmur swept the staff. The name hung in the air, unfamiliar to most electric for a few. Briggs returned his attention fully to Harper. Commander Harper Quinn, he said quietly, with none of the earlier bark. You saved the life of Lieutenant Commander Caleb Rhodes tonight. He is one of ours. He woke up long enough to say one thing before they put him under again for transport. Briggs nodded at the operator, who pulled a small chain from his pocket. A pair of dog tags glinted in the fluorescent light, one older edges scuffed. Attached to the chain was a coin that caught the eye in a different way. This is from him, the operator said. He placed the chain in Harper's open palm. His message was simple. Briggs translated it aloud for everyone within earshot. Find the medic who did not quit, he said. She is one of us. The coin lay heavy in Harper's hand. On one side the seal of Rhodes's squadron, on the other a new engraving. To the doc who did not quit. From the pilot who did not. She closed her fingers around the metal. For a moment the past and the present aligned so sharply it almost hurt. Around them the ER staff stood rooted. Jenna, eyes shiny, Patel blinking rapidly, Lang face drained of color, the familiar arrogance stripped away, leaving something raw and unsettled behind. No one seemed to know what to say. Harper let out a slow breath and looked at Briggs. How stable is he? She asked. Briggs inclined his head, accepting the shift back to clinical ground. Stable enough to talk in short bursts, he said. Not stable enough for the arguments he is trying to pick with anyone who suggests you are not coming to see him. For the first time since the rotors had shaken the building, something close to a smile touched Harper's mouth. Of course he is arguing, she said. He chose a bad night to test his luck. She tucked the coin and tags carefully into her pocket, the metal pressing against the folded scrap of burned jacket she had taken from his bed. The two pieces of his story and hers rested there together, waiting. For a few heartbeats, no one moved. The dog tags and coin sat warm in Harper's hand, heavier than their size allowed. The buzz of the fluorescent lights filled the silence the way sand fills a crack. Lang was the first to find his voice. This is absurd, Rito, he said, the edge in his words brittle rather than sharp. If this is some sort of mistake, it needs to be corrected in the system. She's not command staff. She is a nurse. Briggs turned his head toward him, then really looked at him. The calm in his expression did not change, but his eyes cooled by a few degrees. She is both, he said. Nurse Quinn here, Commander Quinn to us, served as a Navy medical specialist attached to Tier 1 units. She was part of the Black Line Advanced Combat Medicine program. She is the only survivor from the Fallujah blast that took an entire team. He nodded toward the bays, toward the hall where the ICU elevators waited. Many of my men are alive because of what she did that night, he added. Tonight makes twice. Lang took a step back. The words hit him harder than if Briggs had raised his voice. I had no idea, he said. It came out almost as a question thin and lost. She chose not to make it your idea, Briggs replied. Harper let out a slow breath and closed her hand around the tags until the chain bit into her palm. Heat rose behind her eyes for a moment, then settled. I left that world, she said, on purpose. Briggs inclined his head. Understood, he said. We are not here to drag you back into it. One of the younger SEALs shifted his weight boots, squeaking softly on the polished floor. We are here to make sure it does not swallow you anyway, he added under his breath, too quiet for anyone but Briggs and Harper to hear. Briggs continued. We are under orders to debrief you medically, confirm your condition after a 3-hour code like that, he said. Lieutenant Commander Rhodes is stable enough for limited interaction. He requested you very strongly. We also thought you might want to see with your own eyes that he is still breathing. Harper nodded. The tiniest unwinding happened in her shoulders. Then take me to him, she said. Jenna, you have my patience. Jenna snapped out of her stunned stare. I do, she said quickly. We are fine. Go. Her voice wobbled on the last word, but she did not break. As Harper followed Briggs and his team toward the ICU elevators, the ER parted around them. Staff stepped back against the walls. Patients stared. A tech halfway down the hall stopped wheeling a supply cart and simply watched hands resting on the handle as if he had forgotten what he had been doing. The motion felt familiar and foreign at once. Walking in the middle of a column of SEALs had been part of her life once. The clang of weapon metal, the weight of med gear, the smell of oil and cordite all bound up with it. Here, the air smelled of bleach coffee and the faint citrus from a freshly mopped floor. At the elevator, Briggs pressed the button, then glanced sideways at her. They have been trying to give you a code name, he said, almost conversational. They already did, Jerome, Harper answered. They called me Phantom Doc. I hated it. He huffed a soft sound that might have been a laugh. Too late to change it now, he said. The door slid shut on the emergency department. Word of what had happened did not stay in that room. By mid-morning, every corner of Bayview General had heard some version of the story. In the break room behind the admitting desk, in the quiet talk between laboratory techs waiting for machines to finish a run, the pieces passed from mouth to mouth. 3 hours with a hand in a stranger's chest. A Navy helicopter on the roof. Special forces in the ER asking for the quiet nurse by name. The details blurred and sharpened depending on who was telling them. The core stayed the same. In the nurse's locker room, Jenna sat on the bench with her elbows on her knees and stared at the gray metal doors in front of her. We called her timid, she said. Patel sat beside her, hands hanging between his legs, lab coat bunched under him. We called her boring, he said, and safe. I remember saying that once, behind her back, that she would never try anything risky. We mocked her for not applying to the surgical track, Jenna added. We said she was wasting her talent on bed shifts and charting. They let the words sit between them, raw and tasteless. On the far side of the room, a younger nurse rummaged through an open locker, then paused. A small rectangle of cloth had been taped to the inside of the door, half hidden under a spare badge lanyard. It looked old, frayed at the edges, the ink slightly faded from time. She peeled it off carefully and brought it over. There is this, she said. It was in her old locker assignment, must have been left behind. Jenna took it. The paper was stiff, like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. In the center, written in clean block letters, were 4 words. Rescue first, regret later. Jenna ran her thumb over the letters. She never said anything, she murmured. Just showed up, did the work, let us think whatever we wanted. Patel leaned against the cool metal behind him. Maybe that was easier, he said, than explaining to a room full of interns that they know more acronyms than actual medicine. They sat there for a while, the faint muffled sounds of the hospital filtering in, each lost in their own version of the same thought. Up on the administrative floor, the atmosphere was different. Less shame, more calculation. The hospital director stood at the head of the conference table, phone on speaker. The head of risk management sat to his left, a legal pad in front of her pen, tapping a steady, nervous rhythm. Lang sat on the other side, posture stiff. On the phone line, a public relations consultant from downtown Seattle was explaining how many views the grainy video of the helicopter landing already had online. It looks like something from a movie, the consultant said. People love it. They also want to know why there were soldiers in combat gear at a civilian hospital. You will need a clear message. We had no control over their arrival, the director said. They did not ask permission. That part is clear, the consultant replied. What is not clear is how you treat the staff they came for. The director glanced at Lang. There is concern, the risk manager said, her tone careful about the length of the resuscitation. Protocol recommends terminating efforts much earlier in the absence of return of spontaneous circulation. Lang's jaw flexed. Protocol also assumes a standard set of conditions, he said. This case did not meet them. Hypothermia, blunt trauma. She saw an opening and took it. The risk manager arched an eyebrow. So you support her decision, she said. Lang hesitated. Pride, liability, and something like respect collided behind his eyes. I would not have made the same call, he said. I did not think it was possible. I was wrong. The admission hung in the air. The director folded his hands on the table. Whatever we say publicly, we cannot punish the person who saved the life of a decorated serviceman in front of half the department, he said. That would be suicidal for morale and worse for press. The consultant's voice crackled through the speaker again. If you are smart, you lean into it, she said. You reinforce that your staff are empowered to do what is necessary in emergencies, within reason. You clarify that protocol supports judgment, not replaces it. That sounds tidy on a slide, the risk manager said. It is messier with real patients. Patients were always messy, Lang said quietly. The director looked at him, surprised by the softness in his tone. We need something written, the director decided. A policy, something we can point to when the questions come. They spent the next hour arguing over language. How to phrase empowerment without inviting recklessness. How to protect the institution without crushing initiative. In the end, the draft that landed on the table was simple. In circumstances where delay in care presents an immediate threat to life, and where specialist support is unavailable, qualified clinical staff are authorized to initiate life-saving measures at their discretion. Post-event review will prioritize outcomes and good faith action. The unofficial title that spread on the floors later that week was shorter. The Quinn Rule. Back in the ER, life shifted in smaller ways. A resident who might have once snapped fingers for a nurse now said please without thinking about it. When a tech suggested a quicker way to reposition a patient, no one brushed him off. They listened, tried it, and admitted out loud when it worked. Security leaned against the reception desk and told the same story 3 times in one day about how the helicopter had left. It did this little dip with the nose before it pulled away from the pad, he said, hands drawing the motion in the air. Not like a rough ride, more like a nod. I asked a buddy of mine who used to be in the service. He said they only do that for respect, for people they owe. On the walls of the break room, someone had printed a still frame from a cell phone video that caught the Seahawks silhouetted against the early morning sky rotors a blur. Under it, in black pen, someone had written 4 quiet words. Some heroes wear scrubs. Harper came back on a day that did not feel like a day for legends. The sky over Seattle was a flat sheet of cloud. The rain had thinned to a mist that clung to the street and softened the edges of the buildings. Inside Bayview, general morning light leaked through the high windows and mixed with the unchanging fluorescent glow. She pushed open the staff entrance with her shoulder badge already in hand. The scanner beeped, the door unlocked. The familiar wave of hospital air rolled over her. Bleach, coffee, worry. She stepped into the emergency department and the noise dipped. Not all the way to silence, just enough that she felt it. Conversations paused, heads turned, a tech nudged another with his elbow, someone at the nurse station straightened. Jenna was at the station scribbling notes on a chart. When she looked up and saw Harper, her face shifted from concentration to something like relief. "You are back," Jenna said. "I said I would be," Harper replied. Jenna wiped her palms on her scrub top, then caught herself and laughed once quietly at the nervous gesture. We got something while you were off," she said, reaching for a piece of paper taped to the side of the station. "Administration sent it down." Harper took the memo. It was written in the thick language of policy, but the meaning underneath was clear enough. In emergencies when delay could cost a life, and specialists were not available, staff were authorized to act within their training and judgment. Post-event reviews would consider intent and outcome, not just checklists. At the bottom, someone had scrawled in pen, in handwriting, she recognized as one of the senior charge nurses. The Quinn rule, it said, use it well. Harper folded the paper once and set it back on the counter. "Looks like they put it in writing," Jenna said. Her voice held a note of pride as if she had personally moved mountains. "It belongs to all of us," Harper said. "A piece of paper does not work without people behind it." Jenna nodded, eyes bright. There was movement at the far side of the department. Lang stepped out from a side hallway and paused when he saw Harper. For a second, he looked almost like one of the patients caught between steps. He came toward her slower than usual, no charts in his hands, no entourage of residents following at his heels. "Quinn," he said. "Doctor," she replied. He stopped a careful distance away, not so close that he could lean on professional authority, not so far that it could be mistaken for avoidance. "I owe you an apology, Shed," he said. The words cost him something, that much was obvious. "I underestimated you. I misjudged you. I treated you as if you were disposable. That was wrong." Harper studied his face. The usual shield of certainty was cracked. Something more human showed through. "I did not need you to know my resume," she said. "I needed you to see your team." He held her gaze. "I see it now," he said. Too late for that night, not too late for the next one. A few months ago, she would not have believed him. Today, with the memory of his voice in the conference room and the policy that now had her name whispered behind it, she let herself believe he meant it. "I do not hold grudges, Dr. Lang," she said. "Grudges take up too much space. We are full enough." He huffed out a breath that might have been the beginning of a laugh. "Fair," he said. "If there is anything you need for your practice in this department, you ask." Harper glanced around. The ER hummed with its usual mix of chaos and routine. Vitals being called out. Someone pushing a mop. A child crying quietly as a nurse put on a bandage shaped like a cartoon animal. "I need consistent staffing ratios and fewer broken beds," she said. "Start with that." He nodded, once more sober now. "I will see what can be done," he said, and this time it did not sound like a brush-off. A page crackled overhead, calling him to a consult. He stepped back. "Welcome back, Quinn," he said, then turned away. Later that afternoon, Harper was called up to the main lobby. "Your Navy fan club is here," Jenna said, trying for lightness over the phone. They asked nicely. I would not keep them waiting. The lobby was quieter than the ER. Sunlight, pale and thin, slipped through the glass front and spread a weak gold on the floor. Caleb Rhodes sat in a wheelchair near the windows, a brace on one leg. Hospital gown mostly hidden under a navy sweatshirt. An IV pole stood at his side, but the bag hanging from it was small, more maintenance than crisis. His hair was clean now, the blood washed away, but a faint line traced his cheek where a cut was healing. Briggs stood nearby, talking with a woman in a Navy medical uniform. 2 other SEALs leaned against the far wall, relaxed in a way that still left room for alertness. Caleb looked up as Harper approached. His eyes were clearer than they had been in the ICU, a little hazy around the edges but focused. "You look terrible." he said, his mouth twisting into a tired smile. You look worse, Harper answered. He laughed, then winced, a hand going to his ribs. Do not make me do that yet, he said. The stitches complain. Harper pulled a chair over and sat down across from him. How much do you remember? She asked. From the crash, nothing past the moment the truck hit the guardrail, he added. So, what? He said. From here flashes. Cold. Talking I could not quite catch. Your face over me once. I think you were yelling at someone not to call it. I was, she said. He did not listen, I did. He rolled the word over in his mind. You kept at it for 3 hours, he said, with your hand in my chest. It was more like 2 hours and 58 minutes, she said. You took your time. He looked at her for a long moment. They told me what you did in Fallujah, he said. I had heard the rumors before. Phantom Doc, the medic, who would not stop when everyone else had. I did not think I would end up with you twice in one lifetime. Neither did I, she said quietly. He shifted in the chair, reached into the pocket of his sweatshirt, and pulled out another coin. This one was new edges sharp, engraving unblemished. He held it out to her. For the medic who did not quit, he said. From the pilot who should have known better than to argue with gravity. She took it. The metal was still warm from his hand. On one side, the emblem of his squadron. On the other, her call sign was smaller this time, tucked under the main line. To Phantom Doc, thank you for the extra hours. She thumbed the letters once, then slipped the coin into her pocket. It landed against the weight of the older one and the folded scrap of flight jacket metal on metal stories stacking. Briggs moved closer, hands linked loosely behind his back. Our transport team is taking him to the base facility tomorrow, he said. Better long-term care for his type of injuries there. Harper nodded. Good, she said. He will hate the food, but he will be alive to complain about it. Caleb gave her a small crooked grin. Question is, Briggs continued, what about you? Harper looked up at him. What about me? She asked. We can make some calls, Briggs said. Get your clearance reactivated. There are teams that would build whole units around someone with your skills. You know that. Caleb's eyes flicked between them, curious. The guys are already talking, he added. They say if Phantom Doc wants a seat at any table, they will pull out a chair and guard it from anyone who thinks she does not belong. A few years ago, the offer would have pulled at her in a way that made it hard to breathe. The thought of going back to the rhythm of deployments and rosters, to the clarity of missions, to the way everything unnecessary fell away under fire. Now she saw the ER behind her eyes. The old woman with chest pain who told bad jokes. The teenager with the skateboard injury. The drunk who cried when he sobered up enough to realize he had no one to call. People who were not on missions. People who just got sick. People who simply ran out of luck on a Tuesday. I know you can do that, she said. I am grateful for it. She let her gaze drift to the big glass windows where she could see a slice of the sky. I am done sending patched-up bodies back into gunfire, she said. I want to stay where the battles are smaller and every kind of person walks through the doors. Fewer uniforms, more ordinary. Briggs held her eyes, then nodded once. In that case, he said, we will adjust our plans accordingly. He straightened a little. For the record, Commander Quinn, you do not stop being one of us just because you changed your station, he added. I know, she said. I'm just changing the ground I stand on. He smiled, a brief, genuine curve of the mouth. You ever change your mind, you know how to reach us, he said. I do, she said. A shadow moved across the lobby floor. All of them glanced up instinctively. Outside, another Navy helicopter moved across the sky higher, this time not landing. As it passed above the hospital, it dipped its nose in a smooth, respectful tilt. Caleb watched it go. They said that was for you last time, he murmured. I know, Harper said. It was enough. They talked a little longer about nothing and everything. Pain schedules, physical therapy, how long he would be on restricted duty. When the fatigue began to pull at his features again, Harper rose. I will let you rest, she said. He lifted a hand in a half salute. Thank you, he said, for the long way back. Try a shorter one next time, she said. She left them there, heading back toward the department where her badge opened doors, and her hands were expected to be busy. At the break room, she stopped long enough to open her locker. From the small plastic bin at the top, she pulled out the old challenge coin and set it in her palm with the new one. 2 pieces of metal, 2 lives, same hand. She closed her fingers around both and felt their combined weight. Then she slipped them into the inside pocket of her scrub top and closed the locker. The emergency room greeted her with its usual chorus. A monitor alarm here, a baby crying there. Laughter unexpected from the corner where a nurse listened to an elderly patient tell a story that wandered in circles. Harper walked to the triage desk. A new stack of charts waited, names, ages, complaints, unknowns. She pulled on a fresh pair of gloves, the snap of the elastic a familiar sound. All right, she said, her voice steady. Next patient. The monitor at the nearest bed answered with a clear, regular beep, marking out the seconds as the day moved on. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.